Hey, Politigals, welcome back to Based Behavior, the podcast for conservative women who are bold and unfiltered and officially done pretending that the world isn't upside down. If you're new here, buckle up. This is where we call out the cultural rot, expose the media spin, and we say the things that everyone else is too scared to say out loud. And if you've been here since episode 1, you already know how we do it around here. First off, I need to say happy spooky season. I know that this episode technically comes out when it's still the end of September, but the first is this week. So spooky season is upon us. I've even got my jack-o'-lantern t-shirt to celebrate the official start of the season. I will say that this is probably very relatable to a lot of moms. I never really cared a lot about Halloween when I was growing up or even like in my teens or in college, but since having kids, I now have this like newfound appreciation for Halloween because my kids care about it, right? They want to know what we're going to dress up as. They want to buy Halloween decor for the house. And before, I was strictly just like a fall decor girl. I never really bought like jack-o'-lantern or little ghosts to decorate around my house, but my kids love it. So of course I'm going all in. So this is all very new for me, but I'm here for it. Today we have got a packed episode. First, we are breaking down the bombshell admission that Google and YouTube censored conservatives because the Biden administration told them to. And then we're going to get into Trump's massive win at the Supreme Court that kept billions of your tax dollars from being shipped overseas. And then finally, we're going to talk about a case that could force Planned Parenthood to pay back nearly $2 billion in Medicaid funds and what that would mean for the abortion industry as a whole. Plus, we've also got a really fun hot take hotline and a pop culture corner that you do not want to miss. So let's get into it. All right, we need to talk about this bombshell story that was just uncovered by Congress because it confirms what we've been saying for years. Big tech didn't just happen to censor conservatives. They didn't just make mistakes with their algorithms. They were told to do it by the Biden administration. Google just admitted under oath that YouTube banned conservative voices because the Biden White House told them to do it. I mean, that's not a conspiracy theory anymore. That's not speculation. That is government directed censorship, actual First Amendment violations, hiding behind private companies. Here's what happened, okay? The House Judiciary Committee released evidence showing that officials in the Biden administration pressured Google and YouTube to silence certain accounts, videos, and viewpoints that they didn't like. And Google flat out admitted that they complied. They banned entire YouTube accounts, conservative ones, because the government leaned on them to do it. So let me be very clear. This is not just some sort of content moderation. This is the government outsourcing censorship. If the government itself shut down like a conservative newspaper, we would all recognize that as unconstitutional. But when they whisper in big tech's ears and big tech carries it out for them, suddenly the left calls that keeping people safe. Sorry, no, that is still censorship. Think about how many voices were silenced. Independent creators, doctors who questioned lockdowns, politicians warning about election integrity. These weren't terrorists. These weren't criminals. These were Americans exercising their right to free speech. And the Biden White House said, shut them down. And big tech happily complied. Here's the part that should terrify you. If they can do it to them, then they can do it to you. You don't need to have 1 million followers to be targeted. All you need is the wrong opinion. Imagine posting about vaccines or gender ideology or the 2020 election, and the next morning your account is gone. Not because you broke the law, but because the government decided that your voice was dangerous to their narrative. This is why the First Amendment exists. It's not there to protect speech everyone agrees with. It's there to protect the unpopular, the uncomfortable, the inconvenient truths that people in power would rather silence. And Biden's administration didn't just cross the line, they bulldozed right over it. Now, of course, Google is promising that they're not ever going to do that again, but forgive me if I don't take them at their word. These are the same people who blacklisted stories about Hunter Biden's laptop right before an election, and the same people who boosted expert sources that turned out to be wrong about COVID again and again. They're not neutral referees, okay? They are activists with servers. And I'll tell you this as someone who basically lives online, censorship doesn't just shut people up, it shapes reality. If the only videos that you're allowed to see are the ones approved by the current administration, then guess what? Your reality becomes whatever narrative they've decided is safe. That is propaganda. And here's what makes me the most frustrated about all of this. The left has spent years screaming about Trump being a dictator, saying that democracy is dying in darkness. Meanwhile, their guy was literally weaponizing corporate America to silence his political opponents. If that's not authoritarian, I don't know what is. But here is the good news, guys. They got caught. And the truth is coming out. The next step is accountability. Republicans in Congress need to make sure that there are consequences for this, real consequences. Because if we let this slide, the message is going to be clear. The government can censor you as long as they can outsource it to Silicon Valley. So I want you to think about this the next time that a leftist tries to tell you conservatives are exaggerating about free speech being under attack. Show them this story. Google admitted it. Okay, this isn't a conspiracy theory. It's a fact. Here's what it comes down to. Speech that challenges the government should never be silenced by the government. That's not just unconstitutional, that's un-American. Let me know your thoughts on all of this in the comments. Do you think big tech should face penalties for censoring Americans at the government's request? Or do you think that this is just the tip of the iceberg and we haven't even seen how deep it goes yet? Let me know what you think. I want to hear your take. All right, before we get into our next story, I'm going to pause for a second because I need some help from y'all. I need some book recs, like pronto. Every month, our Politicals Facebook group reads a book together, and I feel like it's been really good to give me like some variety so I don't just get stuck in the same genre for too long. I think I'm at 58 books that I've completed so far this year, so I really do read everything. I'm currently in the Powerless series. If you've ever read that, I am absolutely loving it, but I need more ideas for what I can read when I'm done, since I typically read a couple books a week. My goal for the whole year is 75 books, so whatever suggestions you have, drop them in the comments or DM them to me, please. Okay, for our next story, we have to talk about a huge win for President Trump that just came down from the Supreme Court. The court gave the green light for the Trump administration to withhold nearly $4 billion in foreign aid, money that Congress had already approved to send overseas. And of course, the left is absolutely losing it. So let's break down what all of this means and what happened. Congress wanted to shovel billions of your dollars into foreign programs, things like international development projects and climate schemes and so-called democracy building in countries that don't even like us. And President Trump stepped in and said, hold on, before we just ship this money out the door, we're going to review whether it actually serves America's interests. And if it doesn't, then it's not getting funded. And Democrats immediately ran to the courts, like they always do, and they said, the president can't do that. Congress already appropriated the money. But here's the problem with their argument. The Constitution makes the president responsible for executing the law. That includes making sure that spending aligns with U.S. foreign policy. Trump didn't pocket the money himself. He said no more blank checks to the world unless it benefits the American people. So here's the legal backdrop you need to know. A lower court judge in Washington sided with the Democrats and ordered the Trump administration to release the money before the fiscal year ended. But Trump's lawyers appealed, pointing to the Impoundment Control Act, a law that lets presidents temporarily withhold funds if they conflict with national priorities. So the case landed at the Supreme Court, and the justices actually granted Trump's request to pause the lower court's order. So all of that basically means that the money stayed frozen all the way through September 30th, the end of the fiscal year. And once that deadline passed, the money expired, meaning that aid will never leave the United States. That's why the left is so upset, because Trump didn't just delay the spending, he was able to use the court system to ultimately kill it. The left doesn't want to admit this, but this is what leadership looks like. For decades, presidents from both parties have rubber stamped billions in foreign aid with basically zero accountability. And where has that gotten us? Endless wars and failed projects and countries that cash our checks while chanting death to America. Enough. I mean, we just talked about how the Biden administration had no problem leaning on big tech to silence Americans. That was real abuse of power. But when Trump uses his authority to protect American taxpayers from being ripped off by corrupt foreign governments, suddenly that's authoritarian? Please give me a break. Let's talk about what's really going on here. Democrats love foreign aid because it feeds their globalist agenda. It props up the UN, it bankrolls climate initiatives, it sends money to NGOs that turn around and push left wing ideology abroad. But ask yourself this: why are we spending billions on clean energy projects in Africa when families here can barely afford groceries? Why are we funding gender programs in Pakistan while American veterans sleep on the streets? Trump is flipping the script. He's saying America first, not Ukraine, not the UN, not some international bureaucrat's pet project. America first. And that is exactly why the left is panicking. Of course, the media is echoing the Democrats' talking points. They're crying that this will undermine global standing or abandon vulnerable communities. You know what really undermines us? Sending money that we don't have to countries that hate us while our own people suffer. We are $30 trillion in debt. We cannot afford to keep acting like the world's ATM. The Supreme Court's decision doesn't just matter for this one case. It sets the tone. It says that the executive branch has room to question whether every dime Congress earmarks should actually be spent. And honestly, that's the kind of accountability that we need. So let me just put this in plain language. Trump just saved Americans billions. He told the global elites no, and the Supreme Court actually backed him. I mean, that is a win for sovereignty, a win for taxpayers, and a win for common sense. So here's what I want to know from you. Do you think that foreign aid should be frozen altogether until we balance our own budget, or should we still send money overseas, but only if it directly benefits the US? Sound off in the comments, because honestly, this isn't just about money. It's about priorities. And for the first time in a long time, we've got a president who's putting America first. Okay, let's move into our hot take hotline question. I thought that this one was really unique, so I'm excited to kind of share my perspective. The question was, do you think it's worth going to college anymore, or should I just skip it and go straight into working and building a family? And like I said, I think that's such a good question. I probably have a bit of a different take than some other conservative voices that you hear online. So here's kind of my story. I did go to college. I was there for 4.5 years, and I never actually graduated. Not a lot of people know that about me. I think I had 4 different majors during that time because I honestly had no clue what I wanted to do with my life. And even though I don't have a degree hanging on my wall, I will say that those years at college still completely changed the trajectory of my life. I actually discovered my love for politics because of a girl in my sorority. She invited me to a college Republicans meeting, and then within a year, I was president of that chapter and volunteering on political campaigns, and now I have the political career that I have now. And none of that would have been possible without that random invite. So, do you need college to be successful? No, I don't think that you do. I mean, I'm proof of that. I don't have a degree, but I do think that college can be valuable for other reasons, like finding your passion or building a network or just figuring out who you are. My advice is don't think of college as the one and only ticket to a good life. It's not. But also don't write it off completely, because sometimes the experiences that you gain there matter more than the diploma itself. At the end of the day, the question isn't college or no college, it's what's going to put me on the path towards the life that I want to build. And for some people, that's family and work right away, especially if you already know what career that you want to go into. But for others, it's 4 years of classes and trial and error before they find their lane. Either way, you can build a meaningful, successful life. Don't let anyone tell you that there's only one path to get there. But I do want to hear your guys' thoughts on this, whether or not you needed college to get where you are today, and if you think it's still necessary in our society. All right, let's wrap up today's episode with a story that hasn't gotten nearly enough attention, but it could be a massive blow to the abortion industry. Planned Parenthood is in court right now, facing the possibility of having to pay back up to $1.8 billion in Medicaid funds. Yeah, billion with a B. And this isn't just about money, this is about whether the biggest abortion provider in America can keep taking taxpayer dollars while breaking the rules, or if the courts are finally going to say that enough is enough. So here's how we got here. States like Texas and Louisiana moved to cut Planned Parenthood out of Medicaid. They said you do not qualify, you broke the rules, and you're not entitled to keep billing. But Planned Parenthood kept collecting reimbursements anyway. They argued that because of certain injunctions and court delays, that they were still entitled to the money. So while the legal fight dragged on, the checks kept rolling in. So now fast forward, the states are demanding that Planned Parenthood pay it back, all of it. And the number on the table is staggering, nearly $2 billion. Planned Parenthood's argument is basically, well, we thought it was okay at the time, and our lawyers told us that it was fine. But come on, I mean, that excuse would not work for you or me. If you knowingly take money that you're not entitled to, you don't get to shrug and say, oh, my bad. You have to pay it back. And that's the bigger point here. For decades, Planned Parenthood has operated with this attitude that the rules don't apply to them. They hide behind language like women's health care. They collect endless streams of taxpayer money and they funnel it into keeping their abortion empire alive. This case is about calling their bluff. I mean, imagine what it would mean if the court actually sided with the states and forced Planned Parenthood to repay those funds. First, it would send a message that you can't just defy state law and get away with it. Second, it would finally hold an abortion giant financially accountable. And third, it could embolden other states to do the same, to audit and to challenge and to push back against Planned Parenthood's grip on public funding. And let's be clear, even for an organization their size, that is basically Planned Parenthood's entire yearly operating budget. I mean, $1.8 billion. They don't just have that kind of cash sitting around. If the court ordered them to pay it back, they would have to raise emergency funds or take on debt, or more likely close clinics and cut services to stay afloat. That's why this case is such a big deal. It's not just about making them write a check. It could actually force them to shrink their footprint and weaken their influence in states across the country. And think about the bigger political context here, okay? Under Biden, abortion providers were handed everything: more money, more cover, less oversight. I mean, the whole system was designed to keep Planned Parenthood flush with cash. No questions asked. But now, with Trump back in charge, we're not just talking about stopping new funding, we're talking about clawing back what never should have been paid in the first place. That is accountability. So if Planned Parenthood has to pay back even a fraction of this money, it is a massive blow to their operation. And more importantly, I think it's proof that the tide is turning. For too long, they've been untouchable. Okay, this case shows that they're not above the law. So do you think that Planned Parenthood should be forced to repay every dime? Should other states follow this lead and start going after abortion providers that have basically abused Medicaid and committed fraud? And most importantly, when it comes to taxpayer money, should abortion ever have been funded at all? Because honestly, this fight isn't just about courtrooms and legal arguments. It's about whose values your money is supporting. And for the first time in a long time, we might finally see Planned Parenthood have to pay a price. Okay, before we wrap up, let's talk about a little pop culture moment in sports that you don't want to miss. I know that I'm normally talking about Mizzou football if I bring up sports on here, and as a Missouri girl, it kind of pains me to talk about Illinois sports, but you kind of have to hear this story. Cubs rookie Matt Shaw just made headlines for skipping a game in order to attend Charlie Kirk's memorial service. And this wasn't just some casual decision. The Cubs were in the middle of a playoff push against Cincinnati, and Shaw got an exemption to fly to Arizona. And he said he wanted to go because he and Kirk had a personal connection through their shared faith. I mean, Charlie was a huge Cubs fan, and he would even text Shaw after games. And so when Erica Kirk asked him to be there, Shaw said that he couldn't say no. His exact words to the reporters asking about this were, "My connection with Charlie was through our faith. So whatever backlash comes, it's okay." And boy, did the backlash come. Take a look.
Shaw had Cubs World in a tizzy this weekend when he was not here for the Cubs game with the Reds. Game they lost 1-0, and in which his lack of presence was felt. It was later revealed that he had been given permission to attend Charlie Kirk's funeral. And I don't want to talk about any of the politics of it, but the thought of leaving your team in the middle of a race for any reason other than a family emergency really strikes me as weird.
That has been the tone for a lot of the sports media coverage on this, basically dragging him for putting his values above the game. But here's the thing, when was the last time that you saw a professional athlete give up a game in crunch time to take a stand for faith or loyalty or friendship? That doesn't make him selfish, in my opinion. I think it makes him bold, especially in a culture where athletes constantly get praised for activism as long as it's progressive. Matt Shaw is taking heat for showing up for a conservative leader that was his friend, and that tells you everything about the double standard. I think that Shaw's choice says more about him than any stat line ever could, and that's rare and refreshing. I think this is exactly the type of athlete that young boys should be looking up to as a role model. All right, that's going to do it for this week's episode of Base Behavior. If you've made it this far, I already know that you're one of my real ones, so I'm very, very thankful for you. If you're watching on YouTube, go ahead and hit the thumbs up, leave a comment with your thoughts on one of today's stories, and then subscribe so that you don't miss next week's episode. If you're listening on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, hit that follow button, drop a 5-star review. It only takes a few seconds, but it actually does make a huge difference, and it helps us keep growing this community of smart, conservative women who are just tired of the media spin. So don't forget, you can also follow Base Behavior on Instagram and TikTok for daily clips and hot takes. You can also join our Politigals Facebook group to be part of the conversation happening between episodes. And with that, I'm Erica Chwenka from Politics for Her. Thank you for listening, and I will see you next Monday for more Based Behavior.